There was a time in American history when hope disappeared from the streets, when millions of people went to bed hungry, and when the richest country in the world suddenly felt helpless. That time was called the Great Depression. It began in 1929, during a period when America looked powerful, modern, and full of promise. The economy was growing, factories were busy, and the stock market seemed like a machine that could only make people richer. Families believed the future would be brighter than ever before. People invested their savings, borrowed money, bought stocks, and dreamed of building a better life. But behind that dream, danger was growing. Prices in the stock market had risen too high. Too many people were buying shares with borrowed money, believing that the good times would never end. Banks were careless. Businesses were overconfident. And when fear finally entered the market, the entire system began to crack. Then came October 1929. In just a few terrifying days, the stock market collapsed. Prices fell fast, panic spread everywhere, and investors watched their fortunes disappear almost overnight. Men who had once felt rich and secure suddenly lost everything. Businesses failed. Banks closed their doors. Savings vanished. And what began on Wall Street quickly turned into a disaster for the entire nation. The Great Depression was no longer about stocks. It became a crisis of survival. Factories shut down because people could no longer afford to buy goods. Farmers struggled as crop prices fell and droughts destroyed their land. One by one, millions of workers lost their jobs. Fathers who had once proudly provided for their families now stood in long lines, hoping for bread, soup, or any small chance of work. Mothers tried to stretch every last coin to feed their children. Some families were forced to leave their homes. Others lived in shacks made from wood, cardboard, and scrap metal. Across America, hunger became common. Children wore torn clothes and went to school without breakfast. Parents skipped meals so their sons and daughters could eat. In cities, men stood silently in bread lines for hours, waiting for food. In rural towns, farmers watched helplessly as years of hard work turned to dust. The American dream, once so close, now felt impossibly far away. And perhaps the worst part was the fear. No one knew how long the suffering would last. No one knew if the banks would reopen, if jobs would return, or if life would ever become normal again. Every day felt uncertain. Every tomorrow felt dangerous. Families who had once lived with dignity now lived with shame, loss, and silence. But even in this darkness, the people of America kept going. Neighbors helped neighbors. Families stayed together. People shared food, clothes, and hope whenever they could. In the middle of poverty and despair, ordinary Americans showed extraordinary strength. They learned how to survive with almost nothing. They learned how to keep moving forward, even when the future looked empty. Then, in 1933, a new president arrived, Franklin D. Roosevelt. He promised action, relief, and a new beginning. Through programs known as the New Deal, the government tried to create jobs, support struggling families, rebuild confidence, and rescue the economy. It did not solve everything overnight, but it gave many Americans something they had not felt in a long time: hope. Slowly, the country began to recover. Roads were built, workers returned to jobs, banks became safer. The government took a larger role in protecting ordinary people from total financial collapse. It was not a quick recovery, and the pain of the Depression lasted for years. But America survived. The Great Depression was more than an economic disaster. It was one of the hardest tests the nation had ever faced. It shattered lives, destroyed fortunes, and changed the way Americans thought about money, government, and security forever. It taught a painful lesson: that even the strongest nations can fall, and even the brightest dreams can break. But it also revealed something deeper. When America almost lost everything, its people did not give up. In the middle of fear, hunger, and uncertainty, they kept fighting to live, to rebuild, and to believe that better days would come. And that is why the Great Depression remains one of the most powerful stories in American history. not only because of how much was lost, but because of how much courage it took to survive.